Welcome to Maine, we're stretched to the bone. Prices keep rising, the paycheck stays prone. Inflation keeps knocking, won't leave us alone. They're selling the lie, groceries climbing, the gas tank is low. The bill's hitting harder than snow, but silence still blankets the truth. Where does it go? They're selling the lie. Housing is gridlocked from Portland to the county. Workers commute far past what feels soundly. Talk of solution comes yearly, not loudly. They're selling the lie. They're selling the lie. Say every voice counts, but watch who gets lifted. Some stories vanish, some get the spotlight shifted. Depends on what trends and what keeps them gifted. They're selling the lie. I won't believe them, I wanna believe, but truth's always stuck in between. Static and spin, drown the signal again. Nothing is what it seems. I wanna believe you, but every headline turns daylight into redesigned skies. Facts get twisted, context missing. We choke on the simplified alibis. Wanna believe you, but all I see is shadows where the answers should shine. The fact is fiction.
Welcome to the Muddy Waters Podcast, where Mainers tell their stories, unfiltered.
Good morning, Maine. Welcome to the Muddy Waters Podcast. I am Chuck Ellis, and I am your host. The Muddy Waters Podcast, as I always like to say, exists to help the people of Maine better understand what's going on in our state by interviewing people from around the state, letting you get an opportunity to meet candidates, talk to parents, and hear from people at all different levels and tell the stories that the mainstream media, which has become a propaganda arm of the Democrat Party, doesn't want to tell. And in interviewing candidates that they also don't really want to give you the full picture on. They just want to give you a twisted view focused on a couple of things that they think will hurt conservatives. So here we are. And today we are fortunate to have with us candidate for Senate District 23, Ben Porter. Thanks for joining us, Ben.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on and giving me a chance to get my message out to the voters.
Yeah, happy to help. But one of the things that I think we, especially 2 years ago when I ran for office for the first time in 2022. I did no social media, did nothing. After my campaign, I realized something. I realized that, millennials and Gen Z, you're not really generally going to meet them at the door. And so how do we get our message in front of them? Because if they're home, they're going to pretend that they're not home, but they're also not home a lot. And so, very rarely did I meet younger people at the door. And so, especially with younger people, but also with older people, what's a way that we can do better at our message? And in 2024, I ended up having the opportunity to start this podcast. And I think it's just important for us to continue to put more content out there and do everything that we can to get our message to the people. And so that's why we're here, and just fortunate to have people like you making the decision, the really difficult, thankless decision to run for Maine politics, run for office here in Maine. So thank you for doing that. And so to kind of get us started, just kind of tell people like who you are, where you come from, like what have you been doing with your life, and what has led you to the point where you think, hey, I feel like running as a Republican in Maine would be a really great thing for my ego, or mental health. Like what has possessed you to run for political office in Maine, especially in I think Brunswick, which sometimes some of my friends from the area call it the People's Republic of Brunswick, because of how liberal they are. So yeah, what possessed you to get involved? So all those things, where do you come from and what possessed you to get involved?
Well, my family has a history of service. We've served this nation since it was founded in 1776. I have ancestors who fought at Lexington and in the militia in Pennsylvania as well. Yeah, Lexington back when it was part of Maine.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
nice.
So I've served my country my whole life. I've spent 25 years in the Army and then 10 years working in cybersecurity at the U.S. Treasury Department. And I retired from that last May. And here I was sitting around the house minding my own business, and my phone rings and I answered it. And I was asked to serve. And when it comes to your civic duty, my philosophy is if you're asked to serve, the correct answer is always yes.
Yeah. So that's the long and short. That's a very short version, but so it's as simple as that. Just you're somebody who likes to obviously get a history, 25 years in the military. Thank you for your service. I can't imagine that was an easy time, and protecting Maine citizens by protecting our country. So thank you for that. And so beyond. I guess beyond simply, having a willingness to serve, what is it, that has got you in a position where or what are the issues? What is it that motivates you outside of, again, service makes sense, but like, what motivates you to run for political office?
Prioritizing people, prioritizing the citizens of Maine and in this district. And I'll tell you a story that really hit home and really sort of solidified this for me, how much I really want to help. I was on Route 24 here, Harpswell Islands Road, and there was a tragic accident. I think it was January, February. A lady was unfortunately killed. But all the vehicles were stopped and parked, shut off. A couple vehicles ahead of me, there were some trucks, and these guys get out and they're talking to each other. And this one young man said, I could hear him clearly. He said, "Listen, guys, I've got a wife and 2 kids, and I'm working 2 jobs to keep my head above water, and I'm not making it." Right. And all the other guys, like 3 or 4 of the guys he was talking to, they were murmuring in agreement, like, yeah, man. So when I see that hardworking Mainers are doing their best and they're not making it because life has just become unaffordable, that really motivated me to get in help.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's interesting because it seems like the Democrat Party seems to suggest that their purpose is to take government money and spend it to make life easier for working class and poorer people. But we're not seeing that on the ground, are we?
No. And we really need to attract businesses so we can create more foundational jobs. And we're at the end of the line. We're at the end of 95. Remote work helps a bit, but what we need to do is lower our energy costs, because when your energy costs jump 36% in a year, how can you manage a business budget on that? It's very challenging. And we need to lower taxes.
Yep.
Make it an attractive place for people to do business. But, as you saw the other night, they're pushing through another 2% tax on high earners, which will effectively chase money away. Money goes where it's welcome.
Yeah. I continually, I'm both amazed and not amazed. I bring up the fact that there was a report that went out, or not a report, but there was a meme that somebody put suggesting that they were about to pass a bill that was going to cause you to have to register your lawnmower, I think.
Right.
And it was so believable, considering the stuff that they're actually doing, that so many people thought it was true. I think I posted it to a social media page that I manage. And with the question, some people got angry at me. They sent me messages saying, "Why would you post this misinformation?" I was like, "Did you see the question? Is this real?" I didn't know at the time. It was really interesting. It's very believable. And so it's worth posting and asking the question, is this where we are? Because we're not far from there, right? It turned out that it wasn't real, but still we're not far from there. And so it's not that surprising that they might do something, because here again, they're trying to impose a 2% tax on quote unquote high earners. Do you know what the number is for that? What is constituted as a high earner?
$1 million a year, but I didn't
Okay.
see in the bill if it's gross or net.
Which is a really good question. Yep.
And
Yep. So
I didn't see if it applies to small businesses or individuals either. If it applies to gross and small business, it'll destroy the economy.
yeah. So 2% of $1 million is what, 20,000? I think that's what it is. Yeah. So yeah, because 10% would be 200,000. So 20%, I should say, would be 200,000. So $20,000. That's a lot of motivation. Years ago, I had some. This wasn't. This. I mean, the tax rate in Maine is already one of the highest in the nation. And I had a guy I knew who was a surgeon at Togus, who was retiring and making the decision that he was going to primarily live in Florida more than 6 months out of the year because he would save $30,000 a year.
Yes.
And that's, so like the point is, and he wasn't making $1 million a year. Right. And so we're already overburdening our wealthy class, which is, again, like I think that the Democrat Party has proven that they're essentially a bunch of, calling Brunswick the People's Republic of Brunswick is kind of alluding to the fact that it's essentially a communist minded group of people, a town at this point. People have embraced like this idea of socialism and let's tax the rich. But the problem is the rich will, as you said, the rich will always find another place to go where they can make money and where they are welcome. And so like that tax is such a horrible, horrible idea for the long-term prosperity of the Maine people.
Look at New York City as an example. They raised taxes so high, and on all the wealth fled to Miami and Texas. And when they left, the governor was mocking them. And now recently she's begging them to come back. She's not saying she's going to cut their taxes. She's saying, please come back so we can tax your income to pay for all our programs.
Yeah, there are a number of people I've seen, like well-known celebrities. I think Jimmy Fallon may be one of them, and what was the mob actor? Not Al Pacino, but the other guy. Geez, I can't remember his name. Anyway, they were both like they both spent money and helped get Mamdani elected, and now they're like, what are they? You're going to overtax me, and so they're trying to flee the city. Yeah. That's the reality. That's what happens. I think they have this mentality though that they're going to seek to seize control everywhere, and so for a time the wealthy can escape, but they're eventually going to get them, is what they think. But the problem is, I had a guy who ran for House. He's a Democrat on the podcast last year. Because he invited himself on, and I was like, I will let you come on and express what you actually believe. And wow, I just lost my train of thought. Yep. Oh yeah. So I've said this before, but I remember saying it specifically to him, is like that one of the biggest problems that I see with socialism is so in capitalism, this is their belief, right? That the liberals believe that capitalism is going to hurt some people, that not everybody has an equal opportunity is kind of not everybody has the access to the things that they need in order to be successful. And so like there is a reality, and if people try to deny this, I think they're missing reality, that if you have money, it's easier to get things done than if you don't have money. Like that's just a reality, right? At the same time, you could make a comment that there are some people that are able to get ahead easier than others because of capitalism, and I think they see that as being like horrific and wrong. But with socialism, you have shared poverty. So you have, in capitalism, you have the opportunity like that you can go from nothing to be something. And some people will have it easier than others, right? But in socialism, you just have shared poverty unless you are closely associated with the oligarchy. That's your only hope of advancement. And so like that's our choice right now. And Maine is trying to make that abundantly clear. Like, do you want to choose oligarchy, or where the powerful people, the stuff that we have coming out about the people in Augusta, the Democrats, the fraud that's going on. So oligarchy with a whole bunch of fraud, or conservatives. So anyway, I'm talking way too much, Ben. I'll shut up. So what are some other? So obviously, one of the things that you want to prioritize people. You've talked about affordability, energy. What are some other issues or other things that you want to talk about? Why do people in Brunswick, and what are the areas? Because it's Brunswick as well as a number of other little towns that are part of Senate District 23.
Yeah, you got Harpswell, Brunswick, Freeport, Pownell, Yarmouth east of 295, and then the brave souls, the good people out on Chebeague Island.
Nice. And what were some of the other issues?
Yeah. So I'm talking to a lot of my potential constituents and listening to them. I'm making it a point to listen to what's important to people and what's impacting their lives, and asking, what can I do as your senator to help create a better future for you and your family here? And Brunswick is part of my district, and I go that I'm talking to people and listening to the people who live in Brunswick, and I want to help them because they're getting crushed by property taxes. Their property taxes are through the roof, and we need to find a way to rein that in, because a property tax is basically a stealth tax on unrealized capital gains. Okay, not taxed on the basis of spending or income. And that's how we have a lot of retirees here in Maine. We have retirees in Brunswick who are on fixed incomes, but as inflation and their taxes keep increasing, especially property taxes, they get forced out of their homes by it. And as a civilized society, we shouldn't be doing that to people. So I want to look for alternatives to the property tax. And in this beautiful laboratory of democracy with all 50 states, there are other states who are acting on this right now. And I want to see what they're doing, what works, and consider what can work best here in Maine.
Yeah, absolutely. So less taxes for sure. and specifically some relief on the property tax side, as you said, which is absolutely, it's so bizarre. Like our founding fathers are probably rolling over in their graves right now. Like they literally overthrew Britain over 3% tax or something like that. It was a very, compared to like the American who is currently taxed, when you combine everything, 40 to 50% of their income effectively goes to tax. We have a bloated tax system. They're spending way too much money, and again, there's way too much fraud there. But like when it comes to like property tax in particular, it's like, we don't even really own our own property. We're renting from the government. And that's where I hear things like what's going on in Florida and other places where they said, we're going to eliminate the property tax. And I'm like, well, we should. It's my property. And if you want to, create use taxes and stuff like that, and because like some of the stuff that they use the money from property taxes, and things to do might be around the town. I don't know, like the roads and some of these other things. There are other ways to like tax, if you need to tax for those types of things that are more appropriate. But just owning a property that's gone up in value seems to be, because they know that everybody wants to own property. It's the easiest thing to like continue to add on to, but it's interesting. So, so that's one of the issues. And, yep.
Speaking of potholes, a 3-bedroom, 2-bath pothole doesn't solve the housing crisis.
That is accurate. Yeah. And Brunswick, I think is Brunswick home of, or is that Bath where they have all the housing for non-citizens?
It's Brunswick. It's Brunswick. Yeah, it's in Cook's Corner. And, people respond to incentives. I understood why they took it. okay, but that what that does is that removes inventory from the market that could, make it more affordable for Mainers, for Maine citizens.
Yeah. Yeah. So want to definitely prioritize, obviously, as you said, prioritizing people, in particular, Maine citizens, it sounds like.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Putting Maine citizens first in their own state.
I mean, it's a crazy concept, being one of the people who grew up here in Maine, it definitely resonates with me. One of the challenges that this is not exclusive to Maine, but one of the challenges that I see for people who actually grew up here in this state is we're quickly becoming outnumbered by people who didn't come here, who weren't. And I'm not even talking, by the way, non-citizens. I'm talking even like people from Massachusetts and Connecticut and New York and Rhode Island and Pennsylvania who don't really care about the people of Maine. They just care about this great resource that we have, which is the beautiful state of Maine. If you like took a moment away from politics and the cost of living and energy and all that stuff and just walked out into the woods, you're just like, man, is this a beautiful place? An incredible, go to the ocean, just sit there and stare off, like, go rafting, our mountains, like it's an incredible resource that we have here, and they don't care about the people while they do their land acknowledgments. They're busy, excited to tax Mainers out of Maine so that out-of-staters can out-of-staters and non illegal immigrants who they eventually hope to naturalize can take over our state, and it's sickening. And so, like, I'm very excited and appreciate anybody who's willing to run and put Maine citizens first. And
Thanks. And what you said about people moving in and buying property, in this district. You consider Harpswell, Brunswick, Freeport, Yarmouth that's a lot of coastline. I mean, Pownell's there too.
Yeah.
That's a lot of coastline, and access to the waterfront for fishermen is critical, and that's part of our economy and it's part of our heritage, and that needs to be preserved. And when I go to places, like Cundy's Harbor, such beautiful people out there, they bring it up, and we need to preserve it, not just for the next generation, but for the next 250 years. So, people who come in and buy property, they're stakeholders, the fishermen are stakeholders, and the citizens are stakeholders. And I do, for local problems like that, I like local solutions. I believe in bottoms up planning. I believe that the solutions that are generated by the stakeholders are often the most effective ones, especially when it comes to conserving the waterfront for future generations to fish. Because as we know, hunters, fishermen, foresters, people who utilize the land and the sea are often the best conservationists as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know that, like, this is one of the big contentions, talking about the fishing industry. I've had the CEO of NEFSA, New England Fishermen Stewardship Association, on the podcast last January, talking about that exact facts. And whatever reason, I can't. His name is not coming. Jerry Lehman, and he talked a lot about the fact that, like,
awesome.
Yeah. I mean, fishermen. These are generational fishermen. Do you think they want to, like, catch all the fish one year and have nothing the following year? Like, are we kidding here? No, they understand, because they've been doing this generationally, for 100 years plus, and they want to make sure they can continue to do it and pass it down to the next generation. But regulators seem to be against that.
Yeah. I come from farmers. We do the same thing.
Yeah. So
We're stewards of the land.
You come from farmers. Tell me more about that.
Well, I come from farmers and teachers mostly. This is really interesting. My mom and my aunt were born. This is just a generation before me. My mom and my aunt were born in a 2-room farmhouse with no running water and no electricity. And my aunt stayed in farming, and my mom wanted to teach. So she put herself through school, and then got her master's degree in education from Boston College. Well, I spent summers on the farm while she was doing that on my grandpa's farm. And, I was mostly raised by a single mom, and she played a big part in helping me develop my work ethic. Not just her, but also different jobs I had growing up. I've worked on a fishing boat when I was 15, and that is probably one of the most formative experiences of my life. And worked on farms, poured concrete. And when the Gulf War kicked off in 1990, I said, "Hey, there's a war going on. It's time for me to serve." So I ran down to the recruiting station and signed up. I enlisted. I didn't even ask them if they'd pay me. It was so funny. So I was used to pouring concrete, and we often don't take lunch. When you've got drums turning in the sun, heating up, and you got to get that wall poured, or that floor poured, you don't stop for a lunch break. So I think my second day of basic training, we're all marching around. In the middle of the day, we march up to this building, and we all stopped. And I asked the drill sergeant, "Drill sergeant, what are we doing?" And he said, "We got to feed you lunch. We're required to feed you 3 meals a day." And that's when I thought to myself, it's going to take a stick of dynamite and a crowbar to pry me out of this man's army.
Wow.
So I discovered I was good at it. I was good at being a soldier, and I liked it. And I stuck around for 25 years. I started off enlisted, and I got airborne, Ranger qualified. I was working U.S. Army Special Operations. I had the privilege of being able to contribute to some of our country's most sensitive and most important missions. About my 11th year in, my mom got sick and died, and I'm by her hospital bed that night. And she says, "Ben, promise me something." Right? And being the astute negotiator that I am, you don't negotiate with your mom. I said, "I promise, Mom. What is it?" She goes, "Promise me you'll go to college." I go, "Ah!" Because at the time, I got to jump out of planes, shoot guns, blow things up, and drive big trucks, and I got paid twice a month. Why would I go to college? But you got to listen to your mom, no matter how big you are, no matter how tough you think you are. Listen to your mom. She's always right. So, she passed away that night. The next morning, I realized that I'd made a deathbed oath to my mother that I would go to college. So I discovered that if I went to officer candidate school, I'd get commissioned, do 18 months platoon leader time, and then they'd send me to school. They'd give me 18 months to get a 4-year degree. So I did that. I was commissioned in the infantry, and I got to go to Fort Campbell, and I got to be assigned to the 101st Airborne Division. And I got to go to 3rd Brigade, the Roxxons. That's all I wanted. It's very rare the Army grants all 4 of your wishes.
Wow.
So, and then I had, after I left my old job, I thought it would never get better than that. But then I discovered something even better. I had the true honor of leading our young men in combat in 2003 in the invasion of Iraq. And they are just the smartest, most motivated, best people I can think of. I mean, that was a long time ago now, and they're the future. And given my view of that, our future's in good hands with this young generation coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, continuing on my infantry career, after my degree, I transitioned to intelligence, and I got to work in the Army's counter weapons of mass destruction unit. I got to help stand that up. And I was also in charge of operations to remediate 550 metric tons of yellow cake from Saddam's nuclear program in Iraq. We had to get it shipped through downtown Baghdad in 2007, 2008 to the transshipment airfield. So I had to meet those convoys downtown and guide them through in the middle of the night.
Wow.
One RPG in Baghdad would be surrounded by yellow tape to this day.
Wow.
The funny thing about the military is if they told you how much responsibility you'd have going in, you'd be too scared to do it.
Yeah.
But you're there. And what makes America so great and what makes Americans so great is that we're all heroes because we rise to the occasion. And that's all. We have all these candidates running for office to help fix our state now. And we're rising to the occasion to help fix our state. So, just to continue on about my military career, after that, I got a command. I was in charge of 800 people for a couple of years. Really great opportunity. And then I was assigned to Army Cyber Command as they were standing that up as well. And I discovered later on in my career that I was actually sought out to fix broken organizations and broken programs. Not that Army Cyber was broken. We had great leadership. But going through afterwards, I was hired by a veteran to work at the U.S. Treasury Department, program management, strategic planning, and acquisitions. And I would often find that I would get called in and say, "Hey, Ben, this organization or this program is broken. I need you to fix it." And my last, I helped develop the cybersecurity strategic plan. I led the development of it for the U.S. Treasury Department, the 5-year cybersecurity strategic plan, and that was quite an honor. And then I was called to lead to be the contracting officer representative to consolidate all of our security operations centers services across the 11 bureaus for the Treasury, because they were all separate contracts, all paying a premium. So I consolidated them on one 8-year, $20 billion contract that actually saved the taxpayers a lot of money, because we did multiple down selects, first by technical capability and then by price. We were left with 10 vendors on the contract, and who were then, when we put out the requirement for a good or service, they have to compete against each other again on price, and then the contract negotiates that price down even further with the winner. So I do have a lot of experience in reining in budgets and getting control of costs, which is what our state needs, because we have so much fraud, waste, and abuse in our budget now. We don't even know what our true budget looks like while they're continuing to add taxes to it. The starting point is really to cut the fraud, waste, and abuse and get a true look at our actual budget.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we definitely, absolutely, 100% need people with your expertise in Augusta, as you commented on, and the Maine Wire reports on regularly. There's so much fraud, waste, and abuse in Augusta, and it really needs to get sorted out. And you've got the knowledge and experience. And I think the other thing that you're kind of alluding to, like, I'm not alluding to, you're directly saying what you've done in your past is you've helped figure out how to effectively save money by negotiating all these different contracts, which is something we sorely need here in Maine. Yeah, that would be.
Okay, so last year, the state auditor audited the procurement system. I think he pulled 41 contracts. These numbers may not be accurate off the top of my head, and had a look at them, and none of them had an independent government cost estimate, which is required by procurement law. For example, for my contract, I had an entire team working on the cost estimate for 3 months. It's very important, because if you don't have that as a start point, you don't know what kind of bids you're receiving. You don't know if they're in line with the market. And then one of the contracts, okay, a lot of them were sole source, no bid contracts. And the only way you're authorized to award a sole source no bid contract is if the requirement is so unique that nobody else can do it. Okay, so one of the sole source no bid contracts awarded in Augusta, and I believe it was signed off on by the guy in charge of me, who was supposed to be maintaining the integrity of the program, was an $812,000 landscaping contract to cut the grass, awarded to his brother. I mean, if I did something like that for the Treasury Department, I would be in jail, no pay due for the rest of my life. And how they're protecting each other to do this blatant fraud right in front of our faces and daring us to call them out on it. Accountability. Okay. That's the other topic. When I talk to people, they know our state is broken and it's being abused, and they're not seeing accountability, and they want accountability. They want things to be fixed.
Yeah, so I think
it hurts all of us to see how our state's abused like this. I apologize. I'm fired up about this now.
No, that's great. I want you to keep going into it. But I think one of the things one of the challenges, and I think there are some people that don't like me asking these questions, but I'm going to do it anyway because I think it's an important part of the conversation. Is there are a lot of people out there that I'm finding that are definitely don't have faith and trust in the Democrat Party, but they similarly have concerns about the Republican Party. We'll use some examples, right? You look at the fact that and there's more to the story, but people don't care. Always,
Yeah.
right? And there are people who are doing corrupt things, and when Republicans are in charge, we don't always do everything that we I think that the people want. Like, so for instance, right now, I'll use the national conversation. I really want to focus on Maine, but the national conversation informs the voters. Unfortunately, again, we exist to help the people of Maine better understand what's going on in their state. However, people are so focused on the national, and so the question becomes like, okay, people are looking at the Republican Party and they're seeing everything through the lens of what's happening nationally. And nationally, you have the appearance and the reality that Republicans control the House, Republicans control the Senate, and we have a Republican president, and Republican appointed judges lead the Supreme Court. I think most people are pretty happy with what the Supreme Court's doing right now, because they're actually doing their job. The others, in terms of Congress legislating, there's so much that needs to be done, so much that needs to be unwound. The SAVE Act needs to be passed, for instance, and I'm not seeing. I think the people of America are looking and saying, "Look, we've got so much fraud that's happened nationally. So many people that are doing things that they shouldn't be doing. Tim Walz in Minnesota and in Mills here, and we don't see anybody in handcuffs, right? And we don't see like bills that need to be passed being passed. And so I think people are asking the question like, well, okay, the Democrats suck, but the Republicans aren't doing anything. And so I think one of the problems we have on the Republican side is, yes, the Democrat Party looks bad. Like I've quoted this before, and I'll quote it again. Like, I think the Democrat Party at one point had an approval rating below 30%, right? And people would say, well, the Democrat Party is dead. And I said, well, the Republican Party is like 35%, right? So if they're dead, we're dying. And so like, how do we address that? Like, how do we actually have confidence that if we get Republicans in charge in Augusta, and I hope we do, that we'll actually carry through and do things, that we're actually going to put people in handcuffs who are doing inappropriate things, right? That we're actually going to hold people accountable, and we're actually going to make the appropriate changes. Because even I think, as much as everybody loves LePage, this is where I'm getting myself in a whole bunch of trouble, but as much as people love Paul LePage, we didn't reduce the budget even under Paul LePage. I mean, we didn't increase it nearly as much as as under Mills, but we didn't actually. My understanding, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. I haven't been involved in Maine politics as long as everybody, but I've heard that we actually didn't reduce the budget even then. Again, minimal increases, which was much better than the runaway spending of the Mills administration. But how do we know that we're going to actually deliver on these things? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Well, at the state level, we're basically a one-party state right now. The Democrats control everything up in Augusta, and they're also accountable for it. Okay, we have amazing Republicans in office, but they don't have the power and the authority yet. We have great people. We got Trey Wilson, we got Billy Bob Falkingham, we've got longtime gentleman in the House. Dick Campbell's really awesome. In fact, Dick passed, he holds the record for the most co-sponsors on a bill, which is the Purple Heart license plate. I think there's over 200.
Wow.
Yeah. And then they cut it back to like, you can only have 8 sponsors, but Dick Campbell's a great guy. And we have great leadership who they're ready to act, but they need power and authority. And the way we change that is by voting Republicans into office.
Yeah, no, it's a great answer. I think more people, like if you got liberal friends that are out there, or people who are moderates and are just sitting there, stop. We need to redirect them. This is the exact right answer, Ben. I really appreciate direct them away from the national and to the local. Here in the state of Maine, regardless of what you think about what's happening in the deep state, a swamp that exists in DC. Here in the state of Maine, we actually have really good Republicans who are trying to put forth really good policy. And they're just their bills that they're presenting are just being rejected because we don't have the power, because the Democrat Party runs the state of Maine. They run it, and they have for the better part of the last 40 years. We had a blip, right, where you had, if you're counting Angus King as as an independent, and you're saying, well, they didn't, they did. Okay, Angus King, for anybody who's paying attention, we all know he's actually a Democrat. That's why his son, who his big claim to fame is that he learned politics at the feet of his father. And what party is he running under? Oh, the Democrat Party, right? Because Angus King is also a Democrat, both of them. Even though he's not admitting it. But you did have a blip under LePage, and a 2-year period where we controlled the House, the Senate, and the governor. But because Republicans are too nice, and believe in the process and not just doing whatever you can because you're in power, and because we also have diversity of thought, we didn't get, quote unquote, as much done as we would have liked to get done during that time. So even that little blip, but most of that period of time, we've seen heavy influence by Democrats, mostly Democrat control. And this is, so if you see problems in our state, it's driven by the Democrats. And I think that's, and again, we have great Republican representatives, Katrina Smith, Reagan Paul, Representative Laura Libby, and in the past, Honorable Heidi Sampson, and many other people who have spent time trying to pass common sense legislation here in the state of Maine. And they're hampered and hindered by the fact that people are just continue to elect Democrats, and we haven't been able to gain control. But hopefully this year we can wrest that away from them and actually do something good for the people of Maine.
Yeah, I've met Katrina. She's awesome. She's working tirelessly for the people of her district. And Republicans are ready to start implementing changes to make Maine more affordable on day one. We're ready. Yeah. And here's the thing to be aware of. We have an election season coming up. So now the Democrats are passing roll call votes for empty bills that have nice sounding titles, such as fairness and affordability, but there's no policy change. Without a policy change, you're not going to see any reform. So as senator, I will make policy changes to make Maine more affordable. And the reason policy is so important is, imagine you're driving down the road in your car. Okay. And if you're worried about the past, that's like driving down the road, looking up through your mirror to the rear of your window. When you make policy change, you're looking down the road and steering, the ship of state in the direction you want it to go. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I think you're making some really great points about, like, we need to, the bills that the Democrats are passing, that just, I think they're like experts in passing bills that sound good, but practically are harmful. Like I like to make fun of the Inflation Reduction Act, which was a spending bill, economics 101. If the government prints money to spend, that can only negatively impact inflation. In other words, it can only cause inflation to grow. Right. Yeah. So, but they called it the Inflation Reduction Act. It's bogus. It's absurd. But that's the type of bills that they pass. And here in the state of Maine, like you said, there are 3 or 4 that I'd heard of recently, that are just, just meant to be used by them when they go to campaign to say, I passed this bill, knowing you, the people at Maine, the people at home, and your friends and neighbors are going to get these letters in the mail. They're going to say, we worked on this. And you're going to think, oh, that sounds good. It does sound good, but it's not actually good. We need politicians like you, Ben Porter, who are actually going to put in place politics that positively impact the people of Maine, not ones that sound like they will.
Oh, yeah. And don't fall for these tricks. Democrats are going to run on saying, I voted for this nice sounding bill, but it's an empty vessel.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and again, the point, the other thing that you alluded to, just for the people who don't know, I think Representative Laurel Libby came to the Cumberland County Republican Committee this last month and kind of talked about that, and she commented on the fact that, like, the fact there are these roll calls. Like, normally, if everybody agrees on a bill, you don't need to do a roll call because everybody
Right.
agrees. Both the House,
Yes.
the Senate, the Republicans and the Democrats, they all agree. They're
Right.
intentionally calling roll calls so that they can say, and you can look it up and find that they voted in favor of it when everybody was in favor of it. It was no need for a roll call, but they're intentionally doing this as a political tactic to try and make themselves look better ahead of the elections. So that, like, just pay attention. It's just the antics of the Democrats in Augusta are absolutely absurd. You know, you talked earlier too about fishing, and I think I want to go there because, like, I think this plays. And you said that you worked at age 15. You were on a fishing boat. Have you heard? Are you familiar with the stuff that's happening? The shenanigans that are being passed down to the House Minority Leader Billy Bob Falkingham, related to having a young person on his boat just to show him what it was like to be on a fishing boat, and then being a generous person and paying that person probably wages that weren't earned to teach him a lesson about, like, how hard work results in money, and now he's being prosecuted for it.
Mm. Yeah, prosecuted. That's lawfare. He's being politically persecuted for doing what all men should do, which is mentoring our boys, because boys learn at the side of men, and they don't listen to what we tell them, but they watch what we do. And Billy Bob Falkingham's demonstrating inspired leadership to these boys to help them go through that rite of passage to become men. And we should all step up to be as good of a man as he is.
Yeah. What do you say to the fact that the Democrats in Augusta are not saying anything about this? They seem to think it's okay, I guess.
Silence is consent. I've heard that before.
They told us that, right? We'll just use their own logic back at them. Silence is violence that's another one they used to say.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like, look, what's crazy is, like, I'm pretty sure that I don't have the exact details in front of me. I'm hoping to get Billy Bob on here to talk more about that whole situation. But there were like situations where people suggested going after Democrats for different things, and Billy Bob himself, shot them down, right? Like, and the Republicans. This is one of the examples of how Republicans are more ethical than Democrats, because if there was if this was happening to a Democrat under Republican leadership, the entire, like, most of the Republican Party would be here in the state of Maine. Again, don't pay attention to Washington. There's a lot of corruption in Washington in both parties, more in the Democrat Party than the Republican Party, but there's a lot of corruption in Washington, we know. But here in the state of Maine, your Republicans would be fighting to defend a Democrat if this was happening to a Democrat.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the Democrats are silent on the issue and don't seem to care.
And we also need peaceful transitions of power.
Hmm.
That's that's the foundation of our political system, a peaceful transition of power. And if we start, waging lawfare against our political opponents, we're going to go down a road that we don't want to take. We don't go down that road.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is the thing that I was talking with, I think, John Featherston the other day when he was on about this, is like, if at some point it's possible, you at least have to admit the possibility, if you're one of the Democrats right now, or you're somebody who votes Democrat, and say, maybe you don't care so much about this right now, but what if the shoe gets on the other foot? What if, I mean, again, I think Republicans act more honorably in this type of way, but what if Republicans were said, like, well, we're going to start, this is a push, by the way, this is what I hear from people, is that we need to start being more like the Democrats. We need to not care about process. We need to, abolish the filibuster, for instance, nationally. Again, I keep going back to the national because that's what people think about, right? And because if we don't, the Democrats are going to, or we got to play by their rules. And I don't agree with that, right? Like, I don't think we need to abolish the filibuster. Just for the record, briefly, sorry, I'm talking about national politics, Ben, but I do think like there are tactics that we can do, like making the filibuster actually be something that needs to be verbally spoken nationally. It would be a good idea, but I don't think we should abolish the filibuster. Like, saying that the Democrats do things that are unethical does not give us license to also do things unethical. This is one of the things that gets leveled against us because people are frustrated that Democrats get more done, get more bad stuff done. And the Republicans are slower to fix things because they believe in process, that they believe in the rule of law, and they're not just, okay, now we're in power, we're going to do whatever we want. That's not how we operate, and we should not operate that way. But anyway, I guess I had a soapbox. I apologize. but yeah. So
I support the built-in checks and balances in our government.
Yeah.
And as a senator, my job will be to look at policy, budget, and what's a really important function is oversight. The Senate has oversight responsibilities, and the oversight committees are kind of toothless. They need some bite.
Yeah, that would be a good committee for you to be on. I mean, you've got the experience, the knowledge, and so obviously you've got a bit of a difficult fight. You need help. So you are running against, they say in politics not to bring up your opponent, but I think at this point will motivate conservatives to want to support you. You're running against Maddie Daughtry, who is currently the president of the Senate, I believe. Is that what that's called? The Senate president, right? Yeah.
Yes.
And because I guess there's a Senate leader, okay, and then there's the Senate president. Similar how in the House they have the House Speaker and then the House majority leaders. So in the Senate, she's the Senate president. So Brunswick is not called the People's Republic of Brunswick for no reason. They're very liberal leaning, and so you need help. You need people to volunteer on your campaign, give money, etc. How do people help? How do they reach out? How do they give money?
Mm-hmm. I have a Facebook page, Ben Porter from Maine. And
I think either we lost you or you lost me. I'm not 100% sure, Ben. But so I guess we'll just kind of wrap this up with reach out to Ben Porter on his Facebook page. Look for Ben Porter for Maine. If you have any issues finding it, reach out to me, Chuck Ellis, at Muddy Waters. ME on X and every other platform. Just send me a message and I'll get you his contact information. But just thankful for people like Ben who are willing to step up and lead and serve our country, all those different things. If you've been watching, and I just please like, share, subscribe, find the shorts that we do. Please share those out. This podcast will not be successful without everybody participating. This is not about advancing me or my agenda. It's about helping the people of Maine better, like I said, better understand what's going on, and helping combat the left's control of information through the mainstream media by getting stuff out there into social media and doing every little thing that we can to help. And if you haven't already, find a way to volunteer on somebody's campaign, drive them door to door, contribute financially if you're capable. And that's how we win. Also, feel free to check out muddywaters.us, where you can see all of our old episodes. There are a number of other places you can find them, but you can also see our merch. There's some fun stuff that you can do to support the podcast so that I can continue to do this. Thank you all for watching. Have a great day. We'll see you back here in about 45 minutes for another podcast with another House candidate in West Bath and a number of other